interesting listening to you about talking about scientific evidence. And my wife and I have a daughter with a severe form of epilepsy, and we've been on media quite a bit over the last year talking about medical marijuana and really pushing the need for science. We're one of those interesting anecdotal evidence cases. So let me just describe my daughter to you. She's 23 years old. She's had epilepsy since she was 4. She has the cognitive skill level of about a 2 or 3-year-old. And she's always had intractable seizures, so it's been difficult all the way through. She has Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. Anyway, interestingly, throughout her lifetime, we've tried all kinds of different anticonvulsants and, combinations of them. Nothing's really worked. She has an adverse reaction to benzodiazepine, so that sort of wipes out a whole class of potential cures or treatments. So we got to a point essentially a couple of years ago where Stephanie was having drop seizures every day. She broke her legs twice having drop seizures. Any of you who are familiar with drop seizures understand they're just a nasty, nasty thing. So we had episodes where she fell down the stairs. We moved to a condo to get away from stairs. We put her in a wheelchair. So it gets pretty crazy. We also, with anticonvulsants, unfortunately, we went to a drug called Keppra, which seemed to help for a little while. At least it seemed to help with drop seizures. I don't think it's really meant for that, but it seemed to help. Although with epilepsy treatments, it's kind of trial and error. You never really quite know for sure. So with Keppra, her behavior started to get really, really tough. She was becoming really aggressive. She was becoming psychotic. And we got to a point where things were so bad. She was in my wife's car with her driving on the 401, just lost total control. She was sitting in the passenger seat, and she's a big, strong girl. She kicked out the front windshield because she was so angry. And this is my wife on the 401. So you can imagine you get to a point where it's like, what on earth do you do? So we basically, at that point, didn't know quite what to do. She then went through a series of about 5 days where she was having these psychotic episodes for 5 hours in a row where she would just, she'd bang the wall, she'd kick things, she'd pull her hair, and it was really, really difficult. So you get to a point where it's like, my goodness, what do you do? So you go, you call up Ontario Shores and they tell you, well, go to your nearest emergency department. Great. So we went to St. Michael's Hospital just to see if there was anything they could do, and they gave us an antipsychotic medication. That was a bit of a short-term solution, and it didn't really help. So we made the decision at that point to get her off of all of the anticonvulsant medication she was on, start from ground zero. And we've had a neurologist throughout this entire piece, and it's really difficult because they don't really know where you can go with these things as well. Before we decided what to do, we went to see two of the best, top neurologists. I shouldn't say best. Who knows who's best? But two top neurologists, two top neurologists in the province of Ontario, and we talked about alternatives. We talked about the vagus nerve implant. We talked about surgery. We talked about medical marijuana. And it's interesting. One of the neurologists we spoke to really didn't want to even talk about marijuana because there's no scientific evidence. All the things you talked about are really concerns, and we share those concerns. We went to the other neurologist we saw. We talked a lot about vagus nerve implant and surgery. Those options are okay, but the promise, the reward is not that great, in the circumstances. So. We talked about medical marijuana. He wasn't so keen either, but he wanted us to go back and try some of the old tried and true anticonvulsants, and we really didn't want to go there again. So ultimately, our family physician just said, hey, what the hell? Why don't you go and see the Toronto Polyclinic and just try it? What have you got to lose at this stage? And I suspect a lot of people try medical marijuana when they get to that kind of situation. Exactly. He is a good guy. Anyway, we went to the polyclinic. We went through, we talked about her seizures and everything else, and we were prescribed medical marijuana. So we ordered from a place in BC. I'm a lawyer and I get it delivered monthly to my law firm, which is kind of fun. Uh, my little white box is in, great. Um, so we had to learn how to make brownies, and because she can't smoke it, and you know, there was no other really treatment or way to ingest it for her. Um, anyway, really interesting. The first 3 days we tried her on medical marijuana, she had no seizures. And just to give you a bit of context, she was having 5 to 8 seizures every single day. Stephanie has partial complex seizures. She has tonic-clonic seizures. It's a real mixed bag. She'll have drop seizures. So for 3 days, she had no seizures. So it's like, this is interesting. Then she had seizures for a couple of days, and then she started getting into a pattern where she might have maybe 3 or 4 a week. But this is a girl who's having 5 to 8 seizures a day. Now that's only one component. And again, I'll come back to this because marijuana is not the be-all and end-all. There are challenges too. But her behavior, it was quite remarkable. All of a sudden, after a few weeks, she started saying more words. She says one word at a time. She has a vocabulary of maybe 500 words. But she started saying new words we'd never heard before, which was remarkable to us. And she was becoming far more social. And you might say, okay, well, that's, you know, an exuberant parent who's really not seeing what he should be seeing. Her care provider, she's in a program at the Ability Center in Whitby, and we were getting feedback like, my God, what has gotten into your daughter? You know, sense of humor, really alert, focused. So that was a really interesting thing that we had. Now, we don't know if that's because she wasn't on anticonvulsants and maybe the fog had lifted, and if it has anything to do with medical marijuana or not, but this is just an observational thing that was going on. We've been on medical marijuana now for a year and a half. One of the challenges is that there's so many different strains. So you talked about the combination of CBD and THC. Typically, we've tried various different combinations. We kind of think, we have no idea, that we need a high enough level of THC for it to be effective with her. It doesn't seem that just really high CBD, low THC works as well for her, but it's a real trial and error. And a year and a half later, she'll go, it's really interesting, she might have 7, 8 days without a single seizure. Then she might have 3 in one day, she might have 2 in another day. So it hasn't wiped out her seizures, but compared to where we started from, we've seen an amazing change in this young woman. And this is a young woman who's had seizures her entire life. So it was hard. I mean, I'm no doctor, I'm no scientist, but when it goes from here to here in no time, it's pretty hard to attribute the success, or the effect on her seizures to anything but medical marijuana. So it's still a work in progress. We're still trying to find what combinations work best. Whether we were giving her 0.5 gram a day. We don't know whether she needs more than 0.5 gram a day. We've upped it to 3/4 gram a day to see what difference, if any, that makes. But when you're crossing strains and amount, it's not very scientific, and it's pretty hard to get a predictable result. But at the end of the day, we're like everyone else. We'd love to see far more scientific research done to get evidence that it does. I mean, we're convinced it works, but you know, there may be side effects that are there that we haven't seen yet. It's been a year and a half. And just so you know, the only negative side effect we've seen so far, we give her brownies every day, so weight gain has been a bit of an issue. But you know, in the grand scheme of life, weight gain is not such a terrible thing. So it's been an interesting experience, an interesting ride. It's a work in progress, like I said, and we're extremely hopeful that you know, that now that we can get oils and different things, that we can see some research really start happening in this area. Because at least for us, and you know, we're not alone. There are a number of parents that we liaise with who have kids with really difficult to control seizures, and it seems like almost invariably medical marijuana has had some kind of positive impact on their kids' seizures. So that's it for me.